The title of the presentation is An Introduction to Metabolic Testing, Functional Nutrition, and Neurology for Autoimmune Conditions. So my approach is you're coming in with two main sides of a problem. A metabolic problem, which I also put / toxic exposure, and a neurological problem. And so depending on how much, each case is different. Each case is unique. So someone may be coming in with a 75% metabolic problem and a 25% neurological problem. Or they may be coming in with a 35% metabolic problem and 65% neurological problem. So my goal of this presentation is to explain what does it mean by having a metabolic problem and what does it mean by having a neurological problem. So we'll get into that. I told you a little bit about myself. I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I'm also eligible to be a functional nutritionist, so I have to go back to school to do that. I do a lot of functional neurology, and right now, yes?
How are you using the word functional?
Functional means like in practice, meaning in real time. That's the best way to, in real time, yeah. So like if I do, here's an example. If I do a neurological exam with someone, which I do every day. So we do a very thorough neurological exam where we look at your eye movements to see how well your eyes are moving. We look at your balance and coordination. We look at how well you're smelling and you can identify the smell and what it's from. We look at your sensory, from one side versus the other side. And so I may find some deficits on that neurological exam, and yet you go for an MRI and there's no deficits. So the problem is that in real time, there's some problems that aren't being appreciated on the actual neurological MRI. Or another example is you can have diminished bone density, but you do an X-ray and it's not until I think it's 40 to 50 to 60% bone loss that you actually see bone changes. So you're appreciating things before they even happen. That's what I mean by functional. So that's a good question. And now I just talked a little bit about this. How many of us have seen these commercials for 23andMe? You've seen those, yeah? Okay, this is really important for you. Very, very important for you. And so it's genetic testing. And so it's more than just ancestry testing. It's more than just find out what your lineage is, find out your relations. What it's about is do you make energy properly in your body? So we always have to relate this to our symptoms. So if we inherit the majority of our mitochondrial DNA is from our mom. So one of the very first questions I'll ask is, tell me about your mom. Does she have an autoimmunity? Did she have cancer? Was she sick? Did she have exposures to certain things? Because that will dictate why we're suffering with what we're suffering with. And so you can potentially have an inability to make neurotransmitters, and you're more prone to depression or mood disorders or anxiety or mood swings, or you may not be able to break down estrogen effectively because you don't have the enzymes working at full efficiency. Or you may not be able to detoxify. So if you get a virus, all of a sudden, people that don't have these genetic weak links can get rid of these viruses. People that do have these genetic weak links don't get rid of these viruses. And next thing you know, you've expressed your autoimmunity. So one of the things, so now what I'm doing is I'm becoming basically, I guess, an expert in methylation. It's brand new. They did the Human Genome Project in 2003, and we learned how to code for the entire DNA of the body. And I spend all my time now learning this because this is what you're going to see in medicine going forward. Is what's really cool. Here's an example. They can do now swabs of your mouth, and they can tell you based on those swabs, this medication would be good for you. You're not going to break it down effectively. You're not going to break it down too quickly. Or you're not going to break it down too slowly. So as an example, you can have someone who takes oxycodone because they have a lot of pain, and it's like a tic-tac compared to their metabolic activity. They just burn through it right away. And doctors are thinking that they're pain seekers, but they're burning through it very, very quickly. Or you can have someone who takes lithium, and they can overdose because they metabolize it very, very slowly, and they think it's not working, so they up their dosage, and all of a sudden they have toxicity. So that's called pharmacokinetics. But there's something called nutrigenomics. And nutrigenomics is the same way for nutrition. you can identify how foods work for you so that you can get more or less of those foods so that you can work properly. I mean, wouldn't you want to do the nutritional approach? I mean, really, my belief is that you can heal the body provided you give it the right information for it to heal. So that's a big part of what we're doing, and I'm making videos left and right on that because it's brand new stuff. And you can go to mthfr.net. That's a website where you can learn more about that yourself. Dr. Ben Lynch is the main mthfr.net. MTHFR sounds like something else. mthfr.net. Or you go to seekinghealth.org. Seekinghealth.org or mthfr.net. Or you just go to YouTube and punch in Dr. Lynch. And he has awesome stuff, and I'm learning from him on how to teach people how to genetically use their body efficiently. All right, so I'll teach you how you can get this book at the end of the presentation, because my goal is to have everyone have this book because it just gives you so much. An empowered, educated patient is going to do a lot better than someone who doesn't know why. Or I mean, how many of us go to the doctor and they don't really tell us anything? We don't know why or what. I had someone show me all their medications. They had no idea what they were for or what they are. Or, I mean, they don't spend time with you. And one of the things I'll say is the unfortunate thing is insurance doesn't pay for doctors to spend a lot of time with you. Remember what we said is that they get paid less each year for each visit than they did many years ago, so they need to spend less time with you. And at the end of the day, potentially they may say, oh, Mary, you're low or you're high, take this pill or take that pill. And they're not going to try to ask the important questions. Tell me about your mom. Tell me about environmental exposures. Did you have mercury as a kid? Did you live near a power plant? You need to know all these things. And so it takes a lot of time. And so what I tell patients is the sad thing is nowadays you have to look outside the box to get the chronic condition care that you need. And that's really, really sad. But it's out there, and there's doctors like myself that will try to put the puzzle pieces together to try to give you all the information that you need. But the majority of the time, insurance doesn't pay for it. It pays for some of the stuff, but it doesn't pay for a lot of the stuff. And should you care? Yeah, you should care. I mean, I pay over $900 a month for my family for insurance. I want that to go to pay for someone like me. So I do care. But if it's the difference, like Carolyn, in three years she's going to be in a bed. I mean, sometimes we got to invest in ourselves. Not sometimes, all the time. And I kind of joke around, sometimes I think I should have been an electrician or a mechanic or a plumber, because if I told you, the far end of your house lights aren't lighting up, you're going to get that fixed, right? You are. You may call an electrician and he gives you a quote and you're going to say, oh, that's a little too much, I'll call the other guy. And if he's a little cheaper, you go with him, right? But you're going to get it fixed. But when it comes time to you, you may not get it fixed. You go to the Walgreens or try to get that pill and hopefully it will go away. Or if your car's transmission's broken, you're going to get that fixed. You need to get to work. But when it comes to yourself, we don't always pay for that investment. And it's kind of a sad thing. Insurance is like car insurance. It pays for acute stuff. Get in a car accident, insurance pays for that. Have a mechanical problem, transmission problem, insurance is going to pay for that. Have an acute injury, dislocate your finger, you have insurance, it's going to typically pay for that after you paid your deductible at 3 different places, right? That's what I did the other day. But have a chronic condition, have fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmunity, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, lupus, Addison's, have that and have all these things that are causing your immune system to go out of whack, and insurance is pharmaceutically driven and they're going to spend less time with you and base everything on blood works that's already skewed to begin with, skewed, not screwed, both. And I'll explain to you why, and we'll get into that as well. So I'm getting real passionate about it because I do feel it's my mission to help people change. Autoimmunity, the big picture, basically parts of your immune system are not working. It's either overfiring or underfiring. I see a lot of Hashimoto patients here. So just if you can show me how many people know that they have Hashimoto's. So what do you, okay, so I see Hashimoto's patients, and they've been taking Synthroid or levothyroxine or Armour for 15, 20 years, and they got their thyroid removed, right? It's not a thyroid problem. It's an immune problem causing a thyroid problem. So when you get, you have a thyroid that's being attacked by your immune system, and it's called Hashimoto's. That's what you have. And more than likely, you have another autoimmunity against your skin. So and more than likely, you could have another autoimmunity against cells that absorb iron so that you can make red blood cells. So when you have one autoimmunity, you have a more than likely chance of having another autoimmunity. But the point is I get people that call me and say, I had my thyroid removed. Can I still come to your workshop? And I say, did you get your immune system removed when you had the surgery? No, right? I mean, you didn't. And that's the problem. And so the medical model does a great job when it comes time to helping an acute condition. But a chronic condition, the algorithm is all messed up. It really is. It's sad. But anyways, an autoimmunity is an autoimmunity, which means whether you have an autoimmunity against brain tissue, which are things like ALS, MS, Parkinson's, whether you have an autoimmunity against gastrointestinal tissue, which is Crohn's, colitis, IBS, celiac disease. You have an autoimmunity against organic tissue, so it could be Addison's or diabetes or lupus or then so many other ones that I don't even know the names of. When you have these autoimmunities, your immune system is attacking your body. And you need to figure out what is causing the immune system to do that. And that's where the genetics come in, because now I'll get a lot of people and they'll bring in their Santa Claus bag of supplements, right? And they'll say, I don't get why I'm still suffering. And they know more than I used to know about their genetics than me. And they say, I have the COMT gene, I have this gene, I have that gene, and I have this, and I have that. And I don't understand why I'm feeling so bad. And I said, well, you forgot about you. You forgot about what's causing these things, what's driving the bus. And so what I say is, this is the hardware of the computer, but we have software issues that are going to cause the hardware issues. So the software issues are what? Stress, food sensitivities, environmental toxins like pesticides and sprays and GMOs and antibiotic residues and the vaccines that you've had and the environment that you live in with the mold or asbestos or all that stuff that you live with that's causing the immune system to work overtime. And then you're putting too much stress on those genes that aren't working as effectively. And then most people get this reference is, I Love Lucy's at the end of the conveyor belt, and all these chocolates are coming down, and she has nowhere to put them because it's just coming back down too fast. So the autoimmunity is the fact that you're not doing enough with these things coming down the conveyor belt to make energy, to detoxify, to fight off infections. Does that make sense? Kind of. It's really complicated stuff, but you can get down to the bottom of it. The mechanism is the same. It's your immune system that's attacking your tissues. And there's a lot of hope. Autoimmunity, if you are autoimmune against one tissue, you're probably autoimmune against multiple tissues. This is an awesome test. I don't run it all the time, but I do if I have someone that's just really, really suffering. And we want to know the extent of autoimmunities that they have. It's called cyrexlabs.com. You can see it on your PowerPoint. And it's array number 5. And array number 5 is called a multiple autoimmunity screen. So what you're doing is you're testing for predictive antibodies against different tissues. So you can say, hey, I'm sorry, Mary, to tell you that not only do you have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmunity against your thyroid, you have an autoimmunity against brain tissue, against cellular membrane tissue. I mean, unless we get to the bottom of this and slow down the funnel right away, you're really going to be suffering. And it's not just about giving you cortisone and trying to shut down your immune system. It's trying to support the immune system. So big difference. The big picture, the big difference between autoimmune reaction and autoimmune disease. Basically what that means is you can have immune reactivity, but you don't have the full-blown disease yet. So it's not until it's gotten so bad. Medicine is kind of like my kids getting a C+ on a test and saying you don't need extra help. That's what medicine is. Let's wait till they start failing the grade, and then we can give them extra help. That's what medicine, the model is. So what does that mean? That means you're not sick enough yet for me to do anything about it. But when you get sick enough, then I can do something about it. And I'll give you an example. So, and I kind of jumped the gun on this, but we'll give you an example. Who do you think reads your blood tests? It's a trick question.
Not the doctor.
You kind of are right there. I would say, she said the technician. I would say the computer. Right? The computer reads your tests because they put on a high for a test and a low for a test. And if it's out of the high or if it's out of the low, you're told that it's H or it's L. But if you're in the range, you're told that you're normal, right? Even though you still are tired, you're exhausted, you have brain fog, you're cold. I mean, that's what happens. And why does that happen? Because what did I say? Doctors don't have as much time to spend with you as they did before. So it's a lot easier to pick up your blood work and say, okay, everything looks good. Well, wait a minute, I don't feel good. Well, you should feel good. It says it all here that you should feel good. Well, I don't feel good. Well, maybe we give you an antidepressant. You know, I mean, kind of, right? I mean, I joke around, but that's kind of how it goes down. And even better. Well, what about this one that does say H? Well, I'm not that worried about it. I'll just keep my eye on it. What do you mean you're not worried about it? So you got to think about how these ranges were formulated in the first place. The way they were formulated was the average of all the people that took the lab the year before. And they averaged the high and they averaged the low. And if you weren't sicker than that average high or average low, then you're told you're normal. So you have to be sicker than that average person for you to come have a result. And how is the health of our population going? It's getting worse.
Going down.
It's going down, right?
Okay.
So you need to be sicker than the people that are already sick for you to really be told. So back to get my kids who are getting a C+ on a test. Let's wait till you get an F on the test before we actually do something about it. Who wants to wait till they get an F on a test? You want to do it while you're still doing poorly. And that's called functional ranges. We talked about what's functional. Yeah. It's real time. We want to know what a healthy range is. If we were getting insurance and they were going to rate us in terms of health, they would compare us to a healthy people, right, to figure it out. As an example, I say this for my workshops now, I had a person bring in their blood work for glucose. And I don't know where she took this lab because these averages were ridiculous, but it was 65 on the low end and 136 on the high end. So translation, 66 is the same as 134, you know, number one. If you have 134 and I have 60, we're both normal. Number two is who knows what it was required to be diagnosed with diabetes in today's day and age. It's 124 to 126. So this lab interpretation means it's normal to have diabetes now because the high end was 136. So I did a video about that, like I almost pulled all my hair out, saying that now you need to be diabetic in the real high end before you're told that something's wrong with you.
So you can't be a low-end diabetic.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's black or white, unfortunately. So it's either you are over the edge and you really are suffering or you're normal. And there's a lot of shades of gray, and you don't have to be over the edge before you're suffering. You may be just a little bit close to the edge, and I may be a lot over the edge before I'm really suffering. So everyone's phonetic expression is all different. But you can be getting a C+, and more than likely, you're already developing problems. If I'm getting a C+ on a test, I don't know all the material, right? At the end of the day, I'm not an ace at it. So you can have a lot of fatigue, a lot of exhaustion, a lot of crashing, a lot of brain fog, a lot of not sleeping, a lot of feeling cold all the time. And guess what? You're not sicker than the average person, so your blood tests are normal. How many of those, how is that? It's a big aha moment right there, right? That's a big one. Yes?
So then if they say you're pre-diabetic,
yeah.
you're just not in the norm of what
you're not
number is that considers you diabetic, but in reality, most likely.
You already have problems. Yeah, pre-diabetic now is, in my opinion, above 100 for fasting glucose. That's from a functional point of view. Pre-diabetic is above 110. 110 to 126. For that other lab, though, I don't even know what pre-diabetic for that other lab that was 136 on the high end was 120 something. Pre-diabetic is when you're slightly over the edge, but not enough to be fully gone. That's what pre-diabetic, and they use other markers now to show what actually. But here's so one of the things I want you to leave again with is, I used to tell patients that came into my office for a workshop, I would say, if you're here at my workshop, or we sit down and we do a consult, and we do 2 visits, and I go over your blood work, and I do a neurological exam with you, I'm already thinking you're autoimmune until proven otherwise. I'm already thinking that. And most people are autoimmune until proven otherwise. Now what I tell them is, I'm already thinking your mitochondria are sick. Then I don't say until proven otherwise. And that's the thing, is we all have sick mitochondria. And that's what that 23andMe tell us. Some people have more sick mitochondria than others, but we all have sick mitochondria because we live in this environment. But if you're here in my office for an autoimmune workshop, you all have sick mitochondria. And sick mitochondria, the reason I sort of sidestepped into what we're talking about right now, sick mitochondria are all insulin resistant, or what was the word you used? Metabolic syndrome? Pre-diabetic. It's also known as insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. So if someone is syndrome X or pre-diabetic or metabolic syndrome, their mitochondria are sick. I've put someone on a 6-week detox. We removed all of the glutens and grains and controlled their blood sugar, and their A1C was still high. How could that be? Because their mitochondria are sick. We didn't take care of any viruses that they had. We didn't take care of heavy metal exposures that they may have had. We didn't take care of the stress that they have every day they go to work and are in an polluted environment. I mean, not to see like the sky is falling, but they need to address their sick mitochondria. Yes?
I was going to ask, is the pre-diabetic the same as borderline diabetic?
Yeah, I mean, it's all synonyms, like pre-diabetic, borderline diabetic. It means you're insulin resistance. It means that you're inflamed. It means that you're not getting energy into your cells after a meal. So you get people that crash and get that big, sleepy feeling after they eat a meal. That's insulin resistance in a subjective way. But what did I just tell you? It means your mitochondria are sick. That's what it means. There are no cures. It's true. Once you have an autoimmunity, you have an autoimmunity. And the way I explain it is, think of it like a dimmer switch. So we can certainly turn the dimmer switch down, right, so that it's dark, that we're not expressing a lot of light, but we can't ever turn it completely off. So a lot of endocrinologists will say, well, we can't do anything about it. You have an autoimmunity. They're right. But they're not necessarily right in terms of you can't turn that dimmer switch down. So one of the very things that I do is we do antibody testing for your thyroid. And that's how you found out that you're Hashimoto's. I've had patients that do antibody testing for their thyroid, and an acceptable level is 0 to 34, which means if you're 35, then you have an autoimmunity. If you're 27, you don't. But in reality, you probably do also. This patient had 1,800. Right, 1,800. So most people have that are Hashimoto's 200, 400, 600. 1,800 was the most that I saw. She went through a 6-week detox and we got her down to 245. And she feels about 60, 70% better. Now we're going after some viruses and doing some more methylation stuff and more ninja stuff. But the endocrinologists, guess what they don't do? They don't retest antibodies because it's not part of the protocol. It's not part of the algorithm. What's the algorithm? Let's maybe give you a radioactive iodine. Let's burn that thyroid out and keep you on thyroid medication for the rest of your life. It's kind of sad, but that's the way it is, right? I mean, I'm not lying to you. That's how it is. And if you have an autoimmunity, let's give you Remicade, or let's give you anti-inflammatories or cortisone injections for the rest of your life, because we need to shut that immune system down. So, autoimmune disease are increasing every year. Most cases are not diagnosed. Most people don't even know about it. How I know someone has an autoimmunity is they have every symptom. They're exhausted, they're brain foggy, they're cold or hot, or can't lose weight. They have GI problems. They've tried every supplement under the sun and nothing is helping them. Like I joke around, they bring Santa Claus bag of supplements. I know they're autoimmune just based on that. But one step further is I know that their immune cells, their mitochondria are not functioning properly. And so if you Google mitochondrial function, you'll see research upon research upon research, and that's really where the research is going, is mitochondrial problems. Most cases continue to progress. Conventional healthcare has very little to offer besides steroids. Conventional and alternative healthcares may not fully understand autoimmunities, and it all leads to tissue destruction. Autoimmunities, our immune system is mistakenly healthy tissue in our body. It's kind of like termites on the inside of the house wearing out the house. That's what it is. And so you can take thyroid medication till the cows come home, but you haven't addressed the immune problem. Does that make sense? All right. It's not distinguishing between self and non-self. Understanding the autoimmune physiology. Understanding autoimmune physiology, the take-home lesson, we already said that, is your mitochondria are sick. This is the mitochondria. There'll be a test, so study that, and then I'll ask you questions. All right. So the mitochondria, if we remember, science, it was where the PowerPoint of the cell is. But we've learned so much more than it's the PowerPoint of the cell. It's where inflammation takes place. It's where DNA gets repaired. It's where we can detoxify. It's basically more than we ever realized that it is. And so any help that you're going to get is going to be focusing on the mitochondria. Who here takes B12 shots or B12 medications? B12 is very helpful if your mitochondria aren't sick. So some people will do very well with B12 because they're not so far gone where their mitochondria is sick. But you may find that your B12 levels are off the charts and the doctors are saying you have too much B12. It's not getting into your cells. Your mitochondria are sick. You need a genetic test. That's what I would tell you. All right, so immune system, there's two parts. Basically, think of the immune system kind of like a barrier system. So we have all these barriers in our house. We have the screen, the door, the roof, the windows, and whenever that house gets broken into, we've now had an infiltration of the outside to the inside. And so in our house, we can have leaky, roofs, and that can develop critters and mold, and it's kind of the same thing. If we have our barrier system being breached, then we can develop autoimmunities. And so where are the barrier systems? Our skin. I mean, if I were to play in a puddle of dirty water and I had a cut in there, all of a sudden that could get infected. That's a barrier breach system. A big one is the mouth. I mean, we can get a lot of orodental infections. And so I'll ask a big history on, tell me about your mouth background. Do you have you had root canals? Have you had gum infections? Have you had overlays or crowns or bridges? Have you had heavy metals like mercury and other silvers in there? If you have, there's a good chance that autoimmunity is being progressed and made worse by that. Breathing. I mean, if we were in a room full of asbestos, I'm breathing in those toxic fumes, that's going to be a breach of my barrier system. Eyes as well, and then really the lining of our gut wall. So 80% of our immune system is the lining of our GI tract. So anyone who's here who has an autoimmunity that has never really focused on the GI system, the foods that you're eating, healthy replenishing of gut flora, there's other colostrum and PRPs that you can use to help rebuild the gut lining. Suffice to say, if you're not making your gut health a big functioning part of the protocol, you're missing the boat. You're not doing all that you need to be doing. And then white blood cells is part of your immune system. This is a little sciencey. I'll be real quick for it. Th1 and Th2, there's different kinds. The Th1 is the innate immune response. So they call them the Pac-Man of the body. So lining our lining of our gut lining is little secretory IgA cells that can go in there and kill the bacteria on first exposure. That's a Th1. Th2 is an antibody. So you get exposed to a virus, all of a sudden your body makes an antibody to that, and now you have an immunity to that particular antigen. And if we don't have a good balance of Th1 to Th2, we can express autoimmunity. That's probably the most important thing that you need to learn. Th2 is called the humoral response, or the adaptive immune system, where you have an antibody. And that's how vaccines were developed. And that's how homeopathic remedies are developed. So we do a lot of homeopathic remedies, where if someone's had hepatitis virus, herpes virus, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, a human papillomavirus, Lyme disease, if you've had these things, they're contributing to your autoimmunity, and you're putting your head in the sand not addressing that. You need to address that. That's a big one. That should be a big aha moment for you as well. Immune system, Th3, it basically communicates between Th1 and Th2, and then Th17 is a brand new way of us understanding a little bit more about immune system. And like I said, if they're not in balance, then you're going to express your autoimmunity. Cytokines, they're chemical messengers between cells. And basically, we've learned that when our cytokines are upregulated because we've got exposures to all of these environmental toxins, then what happens is we have too much inflammation, and then we turn our cells on. It's like the genes that are coming down the conveyor belts, and we're putting too much of a demand on our genetics, and then all of a sudden we express these autoimmunities. And why does this happen? A lot of it from the environment, right? These are the toxic things that we get exposed to. Parasites, chemicals, molds, pollutants. I mean, actually, you know what? A really good thing that I've discovered now is called scorecard.com. Scorecard.com. So you can punch in your zip code, and you can see what the most pollutant chemical is in that environment, and who the most polluter is. So you can see all those stuff.
What was that website?
It's called scorecard.com. Scorecard.com. But it's a big part of looking at why you're suffering with an autoimmunity. Infections, common infections are parasites, candida, virus, Lyme. You know what's scary about all these things is they all like to live together. So how many of us have ever gone on a candida cleanse? So candida cleanse is a fungus that is in our gut lining, and a candida cleanse, typically we will avoid sugars because it gets fed on those sugars. And so we try to kill off those candida, and it has some effect, but candida is really smart and says, hey, let's live with the metal over there and the mercury and the aluminum so that they can't attack us. That's what it does. So you have these multiple co-infections. It's really scary. And so then you have all these buildup of stuff in your body. All right, so what would trigger all this? Chronic inflammation from a bad diet, potentially. That starts with the hallmark. Remember, we talked about that. I mean, not eating processed foods, eating whole-based food nutritions, having a quick and easy way of having fruit and vegetables in your diet, having green leafy uncooked vegetables is one of the most important things that you can eat. That's for folate. What I want you to do is write this down. Put down folic, F-O-L-I-C, folic acid. How many moms when they were pregnant took folic acid? Yes, because they tell you to, right? So folic is the man-made version of folate. And anything that we eat that's enriched white bread, enriched this, enriched that, in all the cereals and crackers, and all of that contains folic. And if you have an autoimmunity and you have inflammation in your body, you're not necessarily breaking folic into what it needs to be broken down into. And it's still like your lazy cousin sitting on your couch eating all your food and not contributing to the bills. And what does that mean? It means that it's binding to receptors that was meant for the active form of folate to bind to. And now you're not detoxifying, and now you're not regenerating DNA, and now you're not fighting off infections, and now you're not making antioxidants, and now you've just turned on your cells and you've developed an autoimmunity, and now all of a sudden your skin is patchy, or you have brain fog, or you're cold and you can't lose weight, but your blood tests are normal, right? So I mean, it's something wrong. It's problematic. It's changing. It's getting better. So these are all the things that could happen: bad blood sugar, bad adrenals, bad hormone imbalance, neurological imbalances, low vitamin D. How many of us know our vitamin D levels? Do we know? No? Most people are really low. What's that? You just get asked for. Yeah, they mostly do it now. You see it most of the time now, but they still aren't with the research. You still have to ask for it. That's which is ridiculous. But the lab ranges say 30 to 50 now, on 30 to 50. So if you're below 30, it's considered deficient. But research shows 80 to 100. And if the doctors, they show on average, are 17 years behind the research. So what that means is, translation, I had a patient whose vitamin D was 18. So they were really low. And we worked really hard, and I think we got her to 57. And she came back, and she was upset with me. And I said, what's wrong? She said, well, my doctor told me that this is too high. And I said, well, and I joke around, but I was serious. I said, your doctor still listens to 8-track tapes. You know, really, that's what happens. There's these new things called MP3 players, and there's new technology now, and they're not up with the latest research. That's what that means. I had another example of that. How many of you take antacids or Pepcid or not Pepcid, Prilosec or the things like that? Worst thing you can do. Like an antacid, something Nexium. Okay, that's, to me, it's one of the biggest scams on the market. But the problem is that you're not secreting enough stomach acid to digest your food. It just sits there and it ferments. It creates a reflux of acidic feeling. And what do? You take something to even suppress the stomach acid even further.
Right.
You know. So what I tell patients is take something called HCl. It's hydrochloric acid, and it will help with protein, and it will help you break down your foods. So I gave this patient HCl, and she came back to me, and she said, I want my money back. And I said, why? What happened? My doctor's never heard of it before. I said, well, your doctor is listening to 8-track tapes. He doesn't know what's going on. So sometimes doctors don't know it all. I mean, I think their hearts are in the right places, and they want to help you. But you remember, there's an algorithm. And I had to give a doctor CPT codes so that they would run the blood test on one of my patients because insurance won't pay for me to write the test, and he didn't know those CPT codes. So, and he's not going to buck the trend and write for those tests if it's not medically necessary. And guess why it's not medically necessary? Well, not only that, but what did we say about blood tests? They're so broad, right? So that person actually wasn't necessary to write those tests because they were so far in the middle. They weren't sicker than that average person. So why am I going to buck the trend and write a diagnosis of something I don't really even know the diagnosis for? And insurance is going to wonder why I'm running this test, and they're not going to pay for. So, I mean, it's one problem after the next. It's a really big problem.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The HCl, is that something that has to be prescribed? Or
No, you can. I sell them here. You can get them in any nutritional store. And make sure your nutrition is good. I mean, you get what you pay for. Don't get your supplements from Walgreens. I just don't think that that's the place to get them, just because they're cheap, and they're not going to be in a usable form.
Say where to go though.
No, I mean, listen.
You can't recommend.
I can recommend.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have stuff that I find is the best, and I like to use them because I go to their workshops and their educational forums.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's a lot of bad stuff out there. And there's just basic stuff we'll talk about in the middle, which is just very easy, getting your fruit and vegetables, which is very, very easy. That's a good start. But as far as needed stuff, HCl really is really, really great. It's probably the best supplement I've ever had. And it just makes you feel like you've cleared that protein a lot easier. And if you're not clearing that protein, guess what happens? It sits there and it creates leakiness of your gut. So think about a fine metal strainer, and you put the water in that metal strainer, and then it breaks. And now only does the water pass through, but the pasta passes through too. And now what happens in your gut is you don't digest these proteins effectively, and they just kind of sit there and give you acid reflux. You feel crappy, you feel heavy, you feel bloated, and then all of a sudden you don't digest these foods 100%. Your immune system attacks it, and now you've created an antibody to that food, and you have a food sensitivity. So every time you eat gluten or dairy or egg or soy or corn or rice or potato, you develop inflammation. And that inflammation starts to create immune reactions against your thyroid or your other tissues. So So even if you didn't learn anything else but said, I'm just going to get off of gluten, you'll do very well. How do you know if you reacted to all those other foods? You test. You test. And does insurance pay for the testing? No. And should you care? Food allergy test? Okay, it brings a good point. Was it with the skin?
No, just I know just I want to do it. I did it yesterday. I said to the doctor, can I do the blood test for food?
She did it. Okay.
Result, yeah.
Okay, so good and bad. So what would probably happen is if I were to guess which one it would be called tissue transglutaminase. That's what it would be. Okay, to see if you have an immune reaction to that, if you have an antibody to that, and that's predictive of having celiac disease. So what I'll tell patients is all celiac disease are gluten reactive, but not all gluten reactives are celiac disease. So you throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, oh, you're negative, so you don't have any gluten reactivity, but you could have gluten reactivity against your thyroid. So not only that, but that's one antibody to gluten. There's 23 known antibodies, 24 known antibodies. So you're saying just because you're negative to one of the 23, you're negative to 22 of the 23 also. So I see that a lot. And I've had patients that, I'm allowed to go on gluten. I have it right here. I said, okay, do me a favor, just test for this one. You need to test. I believe with my whole heart you need to test. And sure enough, she tested and she was off the charts on all the other ones. And she was mad at me. Why are you mad at me? Because my doctor told me that I wasn't reactive to it and this mustn't be true. I'm like, well, he's listening to, his 8-track tape still. That's what I said.
So there's 23 compounds
in gluten,
whole grain,
in wheat,
in
wheat.
and
And
gluten's just one of 23.
No, gluten is the compounds that has 23 different types of structures.
Okay, and
Yeah.
they only test for one.
They typically test for 1 or 2 of gluten testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Was there another question?
Yeah, for the HCl, is that good? If I just recently had my gallbladder removed,
Yeah.
would that be very helpful?
No, that's different. But that's a whole other story there too. If you want to stay for 2 hours, we'll give you that lecture too. That's more absorption of fatty acids. So biosalts are going to be very helpful for you. And they never tell you that. They never tell you need to be on biosalts for the rest of your life. They don't tell you that. So fatty acids, very important to absorb fatty acids. And that's a whole problem. So right there, that's a big indicator of potential problems for you as well.
Excuse me, what is the better test for the food?
Okay, so it's the Cyrex labs that I use.
That is skin?
No, it's a blood test. Okay, so good question. So skin test is an allergic reaction. And we're not testing allergy reactions. We're testing delayed reactions. Sensitivities, they're not classified as allergies. They're told they're intolerances or are sensitivities, which means you still develop antibodies to the source of the food, and it still disrupts your immune system, but it's not an IgE-mediated reaction, meaning it's not an allergy. So it's not like a nut allergy, and it's not like it creates a histamine response and irritation and bronchial relations. It's more of a delayed response. And most patients will say to me, I did the skin fold and I don't have any allergies. Great, that doesn't mean you don't have any intolerances to it. Well, how do I know you would have a tolerance? I don't feel bad. I said, well, why are you here? Well, I have brain fog, I have an autoimmunity, I have food sensitivity. Really, that's probably in part because of the food sensitivity, not the allergy. And with Carolyn, who did so well, we cut those out of her diet, and she did a miraculous. She thinks I can walk on water. It's not that. It was easy for her. But then for the one that's a little more difficult, it's the viruses, it's the pesticides, it's the genetics, it's the work environment, it's having to go to a job that they hate, it's being in a bad relationship that gives them stress. It's all of those things that are compounded, repetitive over and over and over and over, and it wasn't one major insult, but it was the cumulative effect that eventually broke the levee.
Can you do
Yeah.
the blood test here?
Yeah, I give a kit. Oh, so it's a kit that you go to a lab and I write the requisition for you, you pay me, and the lab draws your blood, and then I get the results back and we go over the results.
Is that like the LCAT?
And it's different. The LCAT, they want me to go to their lab, and I'm like, I don't want to go. Yeah, that's not a true immunoglobulin test. So it's not a true antibody reaction. It's not a true sensitivity or intolerance to. It's just a petri dish that they put your cells in there and their cells, and if there's proliferation, they say you have an allergy or a sensitivity to.
Because I did it like 3 years apart, and my second set was not even close to my first.
Yeah, I mean, it's indicative of immune stress, but it's not a true sensitivity. So,
How
yeah.
long it takes when you quit from the gluten eating?
To have your antibodies go down, usually about 2 weeks to 30 days. So I'll tell someone, you know, if we're doing a sensitivity test, first of all, I never test gluten. I never do. Why do you think I never test gluten?
Because it's not good for you.
You shouldn't be on it anyways. That's right. So we don't do that. But we test the food reactions that are similar to gluten. So we go to the gluten section, free section, and they have quinoa pasta, rice potato or rice bread, or rice crackers, or tapioca, whatever, or oats, or things that are similar to gluten, that aren't those peptide structures that are gluten, but they're cross-reactive grains. And so here you are being so super good about your diet, eating gluten-free, but all that leakiness of your gut is still causing you to react against those foods. So that test I do. And typically someone will say to me, well, I don't eat dairy very much. Good, so when we do your test for dairy, it won't show you have a reaction. If you do, then you're getting dairy somewhere that you don't even realize. So the test array number 4, it's called a cross-reactive test. It includes all the dairy, all oats, rice, eggs, soy, corn, millet, hemp, amaranth, quinoa, tapioca, a lot of similar grains like that. All the things that you eat, yes. But you know what? I get people that's life-changing for. And they eat eggs and they're off the chart. And they never know that because they don't feel bad when they eat eggs, but they're feeling bad in general. And they don't know how bad they're feeling until they remove it, and then they reintroduce it, and like, oh my goodness, I never realized how bad that was. It's kind of like the contrast there. You put your hand in cold water and then put it in hot water. It's going to feel a lot hotter than if you just put it in hot water right away, right? You put it in cold first and then hot, then you're going to notice, oh my goodness, it's really hot. So
This includes barley and millet too?
yes, that's the cross-reactive test.
I never ate that, but I thought they were grains, and
Yeah, it includes,
somebody said, oh, they're okay.
they could be okay for you. You don't know.
Yeah,
It may not be okay for you.
That's enough sacrifice for me to give up.
I wouldn't necessarily say give those up because you know sometimes when I have people that you guys know your stuff now, so you go on the internet and you research and you think about all the things that you shouldn't eat, and then you're not eating anything, right? And there's I'm like you got to eat something, you know.
Yeah.
And so most of the time those tests are really good to say you can eat these things; they're safe now. So that's the.
Basically, autoimmune disease, like you cannot eat quinoa.
No, you're misinterpreting me. So you have more of a likelihood if you're autoimmune to have leakiness of your gut. And leakiness of your gut may have resulted in food reactions that have been tagged by your own immune system, so every time you eat it, but it's not a foregone conclusion. The ones that I have a lot of food reactivity, they're usually the ones that I'm kind of happy about because I know once I cut that out of their diet, they're going to do very well. The ones that don't have a lot of food reactivity, it's like, oh no, now we got a lot more work to do because it's going to be a lot harder to figure out what it is that's going on. It's the viruses, it's the molds, it's the pesticides, it's the silver fillings in their teeth, it's all that other stuff.
We all have the silver.
Well, not all of us, but most of us do, yeah. But not all of us have the silver, plus the spouse that sucks, plus the job that sucks, plus the mother that had a thyroid problem. It's the perfect storm. So it's that perfect storm. So leaky gut we just talked about that. I'm going to skip through this one. 70 to 80% of the immune system is in your gut, and steroids is typically what they recommend. What I tell you to do is identify and remove the autoimmune triggers. Support your immune system through nutrients. Leaky gut, we talked about. We do infection testing, support the mitochondria. All of that stuff is due food sensitivity, chronic inflammation. We talked about 23andMe. I think everyone should do it. I include it in part of my protocol, which I'll explain to you in a couple moments. And it's life-changing. I really believe that. Mitochondrial support, these are great nutrients. CoQ10 is great for mitochondria. Ribose and creatine is all great for mitochondria. L-carnitine is great for, so there's a lot of nutrients that you can take that are great for mitochondria. I don't know if I touched on what you mentioned, but I think it's kind of all, yeah. I do a RepairVite program. That's a 6-week detox. That's the one that Carolyn was talking about, where we remove foods and we try to rebuild the gut and we try to decrease inflammation and detoxify the liver. And everyone does very, very well with that. It's basically a big box of nutrients and then removing foods. But I do other things like infrared saunas, brain-based exercises, which I want to talk about right now. So we talked about in the very beginning, and then we're almost done, is we have metabolic problems, right? And now we talk about neurological problems. So autoimmune patients have brain fog, can't focus, maybe they have balance disorders, they have chronic pain, they have migraine headaches, they have neuropathy and they can't feel their toes or their feet. Why is it that they have these things too? It's not necessarily they have an autoimmunity against their brain tissue. They might. But they have inflammation. And so they have a metabolic problem. We just talked about metabolic, right? Metabolic is, if we define metabolic, it's how well do we convert food into energy. That's the basic definition of metabolism. How well are you converting food into energy? If you're not converting food into energy and 30% of that energy system needs to go to the brain, then all of a sudden the brain's not getting the fuel that it needs. So you need to focus on the neurological component too. So what does that mean? If we have a metabolic problem, your brain will not work right because it's not getting the fuel that it needs. So we get brain misfiring and brain fatigue. And your brain is basically one big receptor. So that's why I do neurological exams and figure out which part of the brain is fatiguing. Is it the front part of the brain? If your front part of your brain is fatiguing, you have focus problems. You're in a room, you're watching TV, someone's talking in the background and you can't drown that out. It's just too much, you can't focus on that. It's a focus problem. Or you have a memory problem, that's temporal lobe. Coming out of the mall and where did I park my car? You know, or is in the middle of a conversation and what was I going to say? That's a temporal lobe problem. Maybe we have a back of the lobe problem and your balance is off and you don't have good balance and stability and you go in a car and you get motion sickness or you get vertigo or dizziness or your movement patterns are a little bit shaky. So that's, you can tell based on a good neurological, or maybe you have chronic pain and you have numbness and tingling in your feet. That's a parietal lobe problem. So that's where our brain-based therapies really make the difference with putting all these things together.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Does seizures fall into that?
Yeah, seizures do. You know what, seizures really fall into, I'm working with a 3-year-old who's autistic and has a lot of seizures. And so that falls into a lot of the genetic components too. So you can have an upregulation of one of your genes and it's making too much sulfur and ammonia. So it's like a really, like, that's one of the differential diagnoses that I would have. So there's a lot of other factors that you'd have to think about.
I mean, is there anything you can test for to see if
You would do
triggering that?
genetic testing, you do a neurological exam to figure out what other things are associated with it. Look at blood work to see if there's an anemia. Good point. So I had a patient who had anemia and they didn't know it. Because why? Because they weren't past those lab ranges, right? They weren't sicker than the average sick person, but they were getting a D on the test. And they did CT scans, EEG testing, XYZ testing, you know, all these blood work, and nothing was going on. And I looked at it and I said, you have anemia. And it's not a CPT code in terms of it's full-blown anemia, but you're trending towards anemia. You're getting a D+ on it. All of a sudden, we got him more absorption of B vitamins and folic acid, folate, not folic, and all of a sudden he's feeling better. And it was an anemia. Sometimes it's that easy. So you have to put your thinking cap on, basically.
Don't you take iron for anemia?
That's a deficiency of, that's an iron deficiency anemia. So you can have two big red blood cells, typically a B12 absorption issue, or folate issue, or too small, typically an iron deficiency, or normal size and could be a chronic disease inflammation that's causing. You have to put your homework on and figure out why is this person anemic. You would look at liver enzymes to see if it's an iron deficiency. You can do other testing, but it's not just enough to say iron deficiency anemia. If the cells are too small, it's iron deficiency. If they're too big, typically it's B12. So we do a lot of brain exercises. And so if you have chronic pain, irritable bowel, frequent urinary tract infections, fibromyalgia, migraine headaches, poor posture, adrenal gland problems, these are causing from the brain as well. And we can address those as well. So I'm just going through a little bit quicker because I know we're taking a lot of time here. You can read all through that, but basically the same reasons that cause the autoimmunities are the same reasons that cause the problems in the brain too. So I'll get a lot of patients that have done a lot of metabolic work before they get here, and no one ever did a neurological exam. When you've watched some of my other videos and people saying how well they're doing, no one ever did neurological exams on them and found that they could, when they stand up, they're falling over. They can't even stand in place. Or when they're trying to touch their nose, they're poking their eye out. I mean, their brain's off. That's a big problem. It's kind of like the analogy is the metabolic problem is the sprinkler system watering the grass. So if you can fix the sprinkler system, you're going to water the grass, it's going to get better. But if there is a patch of grass that didn't get a water for a lot of time, you got to replace that sod. That's kind of like the neurological system where you got to lay down new framework for that brain to function better. And that's where some of our programs is sometimes covered with some of the insurance. And we do a lot of brain exercises in our office. And then we talk about proper nutrients. So one of the things that I believe in very well is a whole food-based nutrition. But we're so pressed for time, you know? Yeah, we're so pressed for time nowadays where we eat on the run, we eat fast foods, we eat packaged foods, and we're just not getting as much nutrients as we need. And when I do blood work, yes?
Yeah, are you sponsored?
No, I have Lynn here today. She's here to just answer any questions about that. I believe in it because, number one, I have the Tower Garden. Have you seen the Tower Garden when you first walk in? So what it is it's really cool, but I'm making my own fruit and vegetables, or my own herbs and my own herb garden, and that's a Juice Plus product. And I think that ultimately, we had a patient who said, was it Farmer Joe or Farmer John or something like that, where if you go, where he believed that everyone should be their own producer of their own nutrients, because all of our vegetables have sprays if you're not getting organic. And so I really like that because my vision is to have people come in and get some of their herbs that are organic and take that home. And Juice Plus sells that. But I also like Juice Plus because they have a children's study foundation, which Lynn could tell you about. But if you go on Juice Plus, your kids go on Juice Plus for free. And I think that's a no-brainer. So I think, you know, and I wanted to just include that because Lynn is here today to talk about that. If you have any questions for her. You did it 15, you don't do it now? Yeah, I mean, you know what the thing is, you know, if you have an autoimmunity, you are not going to go wrong by getting those nutrients because you're going to get methylated folate, you're going to get your assortment of B vitamins, you're going to get your cofactors like selenium, you're going to get all the things that you need to make your reactions occur better.
But isn't it like if you're not absorbing that stuff, you could be putting it
You know, okay, so that's a good question. You would have more of a problem with absorbing proteins because you're not secreting enough stomach acid. But as far as these nutrients go, they have a lot of research behind it that it's easily absorbable. So it's just a lot easier when we're on the go. I don't think it's a replacement for food, but I think it's going to do a good job of replacing the things that you're not getting. Yes?
I just want to say I have nothing to do with selling of it, but I started it. I have MS and 10,000 other things.
Right.
I have found that it has been awesome.
Yeah. I mean, how is it not going to be? It's fruit and vegetables that are going to have the nutrients that you need, that are going to be helpful for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So if you want to ask her any questions, that again, my goal is to add value to as much people as I possibly can, and I think that's a really good product for people. And so I already talked about the lab tests being functionally high and functionally normal. Just real crazy now, look at TSH. On the low end, 0.3 is the low end. 5.7 is the high end. So if you're 0.4 and I'm 5.6, we're both normal. It's just so crazy. 1.8 to 3.0 is the functional range. So if I'm 1.6, I'm told I'm normal, but I'm really on the low end. Or if I'm 5.8, if I'm 4.2, I'm told I'm normal, but I'm above the high end. So it really pays to have your blood work evaluated from a functional point of view. Have someone like myself or someone who does functional medicine look at your blood work and say, you know what? Your test isn't necessarily healthy. You may be considered normal in that you're not sicker than the average sick person, but you're not getting an A+. You're getting a D. And we need to start there. That's my starting point. Bring in your blood work. Let me show you, let me look at it, and let me see if you have any basics that we can fix from the beginning. Anemic concerns, liver enzymes, infections. So many times I see high or low white blood cells, and I ask the patient, what did they say about this? They said nothing. Well, that right there tells me, that you have an immune problem. Your white blood cells are really low, and that's a chronic problem. More than likely, you have a virus. We look at their lymphocytes, and here's the thing about white blood cells. It's just kind of comical. So if you look at your blood work, and you look at white blood cells, and then you go to the differential. So the differentials are neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Those are the differentials. And all of those should add up to equal 100. And when you look at the percentage and it asks you what the lab ranges are for the percentage, it doesn't even show anything. It's like there's no range. So, I mean, not only are the ranges too broad with all the other stuff, there's actually no range there, which is crazy. So there is a functional range, and this person, you shouldn't be above 40% for your lymphocytes. And if you're above 40%, there's probably a good chance you have a virus. And so that virus is really messing up your immune system, and we need to attack that. And so that's kind of how we do about that. So we talked about it. I do genetic testing, food sensitivity testings, saliva testing for hormones, and sometimes I'll do stool samples. And so that's how my office is a little bit differently. Hopefully I got you thinking outside the box. I know we went over a lot, but I have an offer for you guys, and I think it's a great offer, and I really would love for you guys to take advantage of that. The way it works is I have a 2-visit offer. And so on visit 1, we give you our packet of paperwork to fill out. It's about 20 to 25 pages. And it gets into your environmental history, your dietary history, your family history, your major complaints. You fill out questionnaires so I can determine if you have metabolic issues with the liver or the adrenals or the thyroid or the blood. If you haven't had blood done for a while, you ask their questionnaires on neurological findings. Is it the back of the brain or the front of the brain or the side of the brain? Is it a fuel problem to the brain? Are there neurotransmitter? It's really in depth. And then you come in and bring your blood work so that I can put it on a functional scale and evaluate where you're at. And then I do a neurological exam. And I always suggest that you be with a spouse on that visit if you can. Because when you're here, especially for my autoimmune workshop, you're sick. There's a lot going wrong with you, and unless you fix this now, you're going down a steady hill. And no one's really addressing it from this point of view. And a spouse needs to be there to see how bad it is. But I tell patients, if you're in one room and watching a show and your spouse is in the other room watching the same show, maybe they don't need to be here. But it's a serious problem, and they need to be here for support. So I usually ask for spouses to be here as much as possible to support you. And then what we do is we have visit 2, and I go over the results of what I found on your blood work. I go over the results of what we talked about on the with the neurological examination, what side of the brain is not working effectively and what's going on, what your questionnaires show, and what we talked about environmentally, and what you need to do next. What tests do you need to do? What tests were incomplete? What does my program entail? In terms of, I would recommend that you do additional testing for your saliva, for the genetics you kind of know about, food sensitivities you know about, saliva samples for your hormones that we didn't really get into too much today. And then I usually like to do a detox. And I'd like to see you come in my office and go through my brain program and try to get that brain firing a little bit better.
How do you do the detox? What do you do?
I have a bunch of different ways. So I have infrared technology. So you're in an infrared table. We do also homeopathic preparations to identify mercury, mold, xenobiotics, pesticides, viruses, and we prepare homeopathic remedies. I do a 6-week detox with proven botanicals like things that are going to reduce inflammation in your body, things that are going to repair your gut in your body, things that are going to help your liver detox. That's the typical 6-week detox that you saw Carolyn go through, and she was doing better with that. And then basically what happens is you let me know if you want to accept my recommendations. Included in that is this book. And my typical price for that appointment is $149, but for both appointments. So it's already a good deal to begin with because it's 2 hours of my time. But because you've sat through a workshop and you've learned what I do, it's $75. So if it's not worth it for you to do $75, which is fine, you're not sick enough. I really believe that, which is good. You're not sick enough. You're here for information. But you get the book and you get a lot of useful information for that 2 hours. And every single one of you should sign up for that. And if you do, you just go to the front and talk to Sydney and tell her you want to sign up. And what you're doing is you're reserving my time. Because I never had people prepay and then they would pay the day they come, and then I would sit aside an hour, and they wouldn't show up. And now I'm twiddling my thumbs for an hour. So you're reserving your time. You get the book, and I spend 2 hours with you. To me, it's a no-brainer. Every single one of you should sign up. And if you don't, you're not sick enough. I really feel that way. But I have a couple rules as well. You can't be a pain in the butt. And what I mean by that is, you can have a bad brain and you may not be focusing and you may be miserable and you may not feel happy, but if you don't feel what I'm telling you is going to help you and you're going to be a pain in the butt, then I don't want to work with you. I mean, I tell patients, I can't care more about your health than you are going to care about your health. I mean, really, I can't. And I've had it where the spouse came with them and they were crossing their elbows and they didn't come to the workshop and they were asking me all these things about it and I don't believe in this and I felt like I was like interrogation. You know, I was like, at somewhere a flip just switched in my head and I just said, you know what, this is not going to work. I'm sorry for your wife that she's suffering so much, but I'm not going to accept you as a patient. Because this is my office. I didn't see an emergency room on there and I'm going to help people that want to be helped. And so I will care as much as you, but I won't care more. And you have to make some changes. You know, you have to think outside the box. You may have to do some testing that will tell you some results you don't want to hear, like you reacted to egg or dairy or soy. You need to do a better job of your nutrition, and you can't wait 20 hours between the time you ate this morning and the time it is right now. And we got to try to address the stressors in your body.
If you stop eating the eggs and the dairy, so if you do the test, you're not going to see that result.
I say you do that once you figure the test. Once you do you're not stopping to eat it first. You're getting the test done, and then you're stuff.
I stopped eating.
Okay, so you would do the test anyways and see what other foods, because the panel doesn't just have those 2 markers on it. The panel has about 25 markers on it. So you'll see all the other reactivities to foods. And if you do react to the ones that you thought you removed, you're still getting it somewhere. So it's kind of good in that way. And then so you have to take accountability for your health. I really wish I didn't have to do these workshops, although I would still because I love to teach. But I really wish I didn't have to, teach people about what's going on. And I could be like my friend who's the eye doctor, and they have 75 people in their office every day because Medicare pays for it. I wish I was that. But like I mentioned before, medicine only pays for acute things, and things to be pharmaceutically driven, and things to be told you're high or you're low here, and not to sit down and put all the X's and O's together. I really wish that wasn't the case. It's a sad, don't shoot the messenger. I tell patients, if you want a ballpark and you accept my best recommendations, it could be somewhere in the 200 to 400 per month for 18 to 24 months. That's the best I can give you a ballpark for. Yeah, I mean, you know, I tell patients that you're not sick enough. I really mean that. When I get to day 2 and I say, here's what I found, and here's what's going wrong with you, and here's how much it's going to cost for us to try to attempt to fix that, and see some really good protocols to do that, and you don't want to, and I tell you it's $350 based on everything that I recommended for the next 18 months if you finance it. And you head hits the floor and say, I had no idea, then you missed the message. I don't want to get to day 2 and you tell me, oh my God, I didn't know it was going to be that much. And I don't feel that's much.
The 400 is including the vitamin that you give.
It's including all of that, yeah.
And the testing?
The blood,
It's including the testing too. Yes. No, not the Juice Plus. No, not the Juice Plus. It's not including that.
I can explain all that.
Yeah, she can explain that to you today.
No, I took this 15 years ago. I gave it to my kids also. I know about the juice plus, yeah, but I stopped a long time ago.
We gotta get you.
All right, so yes, you know, some people, now here's the thing. Some people will just do a la carte stuff with me, and I'm okay with that, which means I like the food sensitivity test. That's what I want to do. Here's my a la carte test price, and I charge $99 for my interpretation. So we can do as little as that. So I really accept that if you don't sign up today because of your concern because of costs, we can start as little as getting you on HCL and helping you break down foods better. I mean, we can start as little as that. So there's no reason to not sign up, in my opinion. Yes?
Is that like we just pay you monthly or something?
No, okay, so it's a good question. So typically when I give you my best recommendations, it works like this. I saw all these things that are going on and all these questionnaires that you filled out. You told me about your mom. You told me about the environmental exposures. I was able to review your blood work. We found that you have some digestive issues, some immune responses. I want to do a food sensitivity test with you. I want to do the genetic test with you. I want to do a 6-week detox with you. I want to test your antibodies, and I want to do a saliva sample for hormones. I also want to see you, say, for 12 visits in my office. My most protocol is 45 visits. And that's where we do brain activities, depending on how bad you are. If we find you're off the charts with your neurological findings, you may need 45 visits. And we do a lot of brain exercises, which I'll show you that we do. That includes all the infrared treatments. It includes my homeopathic protocols. And you have some insurance coverage. It's not very much. We'll give you a super bill. They'll reimburse you for the visits. And if you want to finance it with a third party, like Care Credit, if you went to the dentist and you were getting a third credit, you can finance it for interest-free up to 12 months. Or if you want to take it out a little bit further and pay for it over, 18 months, it works out to be between $200 to $400 with that third party. I do in-house financing, and I split it into 3. But again, I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Does your HSN cover it?
Yeah, it does.
HSA, I mean?
Yeah, HSA, it covers it. So
And-
we
and-
give.
And as a chiropractor, like, would you?
I would just
does it
be.
take like a chiropractor service?
Yeah, I
Or
do.
Like a visit?
I include that in my visits as my protocols.
So your visit could be included as a chiropractor?
What I do is I bill CPT codes that are identified for chiropractors.
Yeah, which is what I.
Yeah.
I have chiropractic.
That's what I do, but I'm doing all the other stuff.
Right.
Do you accept like Obamacare?
I don't have a lot of insurances that I'm on network anymore with, because when I was having to jump on one foot and tap my head and get reimbursed for 3 visits, and then we'll anoint you with another 3 visits and we'll give you $35 a visit, I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. So yeah.
For my case, like I have the psoriasis and the Hashimoto and the thyroid. How long am I gonna see?
We have to sit down and talk. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know that I can tell you that it's going to include some metabolic protocols. I don't know what's going on neurologically with you, so once I find that out and we determine, then I can give you my best recommendations. But this is what I've prepared as part of my outline as what we need to give you the idea so you leave. Part of, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Do you ever run the full panel of Cyrex Lab on someone?
If they need it, you know, that's a great question. That's the autoimmune panel. I do, yeah, I do, and that will be a little bit more. With my autoimmune workshops, I typically do because they're here for an autoimmune protocol. With my IBS Crohn's colitis ones, I may not. With my diabetes ones, I may not. With my peripheral neuropathy, I may not. But autoimmune, typically I will. And that test, I want to say that test is $575. It might be somewhere in that area there. Just that test alone.
To do the full?
No, just the autoimmunity one. I'll go over. I mean, sign up. I mean, don't not sign up. All right. Is there any other questions? No? So if you can just go, I mean, please sign up. I really would love to help you out. You have to set your appointment up with Sid, and then I can go over your each and individual cases.
Do you work with other, like, for instance, I have a neurologist.
Yeah.
Who is in HRT, I believe.
Who's what? Excuse me?
He's old school.
Okay, yeah.
And he doesn't